this week we're talking about a Swedish hardcore punk band called Refused, and oh, I've probably mentioned this many times on previous episodes that um, growing up like that late 90s, early 2000s millennium era, um, my family had cable and there was a channel called The Box where it was just like 24/7 music videos, and you could like pay to request a music video, and I believe this is where I would always see this music video, and it always stood out to me because the New Noise music video came out in 1998, and this was when like the boy bands and Britney Spears were really starting to explode in popularity. So you weren't really seeing bands like this in the mainstream, and this was a Swedish hardcore band that formed in 1991, and this album, their album was called The Shape of Punk to Come, and they had this philosophy to the album where they wanted to challenge existing punk sensibilities and kind of think about how can like hardcore punk bands be anti-establishment if they're just using revolutionary lyrics in sounds that have already been exposed to the mainstream and that are accepted to the mainstream. So it might seem like, you know, something that we all know of now, especially after hearing nu metal and stuff, but at this time, Refused, they incorporated like post-hardcore, post-punk, electronic, jazz, like they incorporated all these different sounds into this album. So when it was released, it was a critical failure, it was a commercial failure, people didn't understand this sound, like I guess many people thought it sounded like a mess or something like that, because it did not sound like people were like, oh, this isn't punk, like that kind of attitude. And so this was not a successful album when it came out, but I remember always seeing this music video on like The Box, and it's a very simple concept. We see like the band, they're just running around like in these different costumes, and they wear these different masks, and then it's essentially like a performance video, but it's very entertaining. And then there's lyrics like, how do you expect anyone to listen if we just hear the same old voice? We need new noise. And then there's lyrics about wanting to take back the airwaves, like that kind of thing, and it's like screamo.
And there's also lyrics where they purposefully sing, and they sing like old punk songs, and they sound and they use old punk style lyrics, and then while they do that, they use like canned laughter or like canned clapping, like you hear an audience applaud when they do that, and then after that is when the song actually gets angrier, because like, why do we have to do that for you to pay attention?
So that was something they did throughout the album. Like in between songs, they would have like these like political like sounds and stuff like that. Even in New Noise, where the music kind of calms down again before it's going to go into another breakdown, there's a sample of Marlon Brando speaking from Apocalypse Now.
Yep.
So the way they made the album, they just infused all these different sounds, like recorded them separately and then put it all together and used like samples and stuff like that. So it's like a fusion, and at the time, I guess just no one understood it. And then the band ended up splitting up a few months after the release of the album, because they started touring in the U.S. for it, and the tour was canceled only after 8 shows. They had, speaking of Virginia, again, like we did with Cherry Falls, the last show that Refused did on this tour was in Virginia, and after only 4 songs, the police broke up the show. It was like very chaotic, so then the band ended up splitting up, and about a year after they split up, the album sales started to pick up, because then the stories of their final show started to become popular, and then other artists started citing them publicly as an influence.
Mm-hmm.
And now this album, you can see it on many like lists of like the 100 most influential punk albums ever made, or the most influential post-punk album of like the past 30 years, like stuff like that. And it's the music video. So the front man, his name is Dennis. At the time, he was really into surrealism and like political art and mod and soul music. So the idea for the video was like his, and the way it was directed. They really didn't have a concept for the video. They just showed up to this warehouse, and there was this guy there named Jock, I believe, if I remember correctly. And he was like, I rented all these Marshall amps, and they're all set up, and there's some costumes here and some masks, and there's a device that we're gonna have you swing upside down.
Which, that's some of the coolest shots in the video are the lead singer upside down, and like the camera's swinging, and everybody's performing them standing upright behind him.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. Like,
so yeah, they really didn't have a concept for the video. They went with it, and
which is funny because I was interpreting shit. I was making stuff up in my head. I was like, because there's some things that you go, oh yeah, and then to realize that there was actually nothing there. Actually, I mean, when left up to interpretation, the mind runs wild, I guess. But
it's hard to even find information on the music video. Like most bands, they'll have like a Wikipedia or something for their music videos. This band does not, so I had to dig deep into old interviews. And so they pretty much were making it up as they went along, and that's what we have now. And years later, so MTV used to have like making the video, and like it was like the mid 2000s when bands like you started seeing more of the emo bands like Taking Back Sunday and stuff like that. And Taking Back Sunday had this music video called This Photograph is Proof, and there was a making the video episode of that on MTV, and that music video was directed by Tom DeLonge from Blink-182.
That's cool.
And they were in the middle of a tour, and they made the video in 48 hours, but I'm watching the episode, and they're talking to Tom DeLonge, and he was like, yeah, years ago there was this music video by this band called Refused, and they had all these masks. So I had the idea that I wanted Taking Back Sunday to wear these masks and stuff, and that's where the idea came from, was from that music video.
So cool.
But yeah.
I'm a fan of Taking Back Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've got a couple good ones.
I saw them live like 4 times.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Did you see them at Pitchfork?
No,
I know. I'm just.
Tours.
That's just a different.
I used to go to a lot of concerts, but
anybody we listen to, she'll be like, "Oh, I saw him live." Anybody I listen to that she doesn't even care for, she'll be like, "Oh, Schoolboy Q, I saw him live." It's like, what? Okay, Kendrick Lamar, I saw him right when the first album came out. I was like, gee, okay, stop.
But, the band was inspired by a lot of, like, older sounds and, like, jazz, and even, the album title, The Shape of Punk to Come, was a reference to this 1959 avant-garde jazz album by Ornette Coleman called The Shape of Jazz to Come. But at the time it was misunderstood, but now you can see this album on all of the, influential lists, and other artists will now openly talk about the influence that Refused had on them. And the song New Noise has been featured in movies like Crank, TV shows like Friday Night Lights, Nitro Circus, video games like Doom, Tony Hawk's Underground. There was even
I played the shit out of Tony Hawk's Underground.
Yeah, there was even a baseball player, a pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers, John Axford, and when he would close out games, New Noise would be his entrance music.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
But it's a very, even Steve Aoki, his first, album, it was called, Pillowface and the Airplane Chronicles or something like that. He did a remix of New Noise on that.
Okay.
He made it a little bit faster. It still pretty much sounds the same. It's just a little bit faster, but that was I believe, the opening track on that album. That was an album I used to listen to a lot. But over the years, the band has reunited. In fact, they reunited for the first time around 2012 when another band at the drive-in that was kind of the same genre also reunited.
Also highly influential band.
I love them. I'm a big fan of the Mars Volta, and of course members of the Mars Volta were from At the Drive-In. But it's just, I don't know. It's funny how things come full circle like that, because then I believe both Refused and At the Drive-In were playing Coachella and these big festivals when they decided to reunite. And
which is all. I also wanted to talk about something that we see pretty often in influential albums, or especially albums like this one, where the artist wasn't trying to make anything commercial. They were trying to make their own art. They were drawing from things that they were inspired by. Mm-hmm. Because those albums generally don't do well. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of albums. I mean, even when you look at and I don't care what anybody says, the original reception to Childish Gambino's Awaken My Love album was pretty negative. Because it wasn't what people wanted to hear from him, and they didn't know what to make of what they were hearing. He wanted to make a funk album and a soul album, and people wanted to hear Because the Internet again. Mm-hmm. And so anytime an artist, I'm sure you could come up with 3 off the top of your head of albums where the artist wanted to make art and it just didn't do well. Mm-hmm. And it's sad, because I don't think people do it consciously. I think it's an unconscious thing that the public does, where they go, it doesn't sound like what I want to hear right now. Mm-hmm. And then 2, 3, 4 years later...
Yeah, just a few years later,
that's
what's mainstream.
Yep, that's exactly what they want to hear.
Yeah. And this song, I think because of all those different fusions, it still feels fresh.
It does.
It was really ahead of its time, but it gets you pumped up. Mm-hmm. It's really good. The video is really good. It's fun to watch. It's definitely deserving to be on all those lists, and you hear it now, and you can hear all the bands that have, formed since then in this, and you can really hear the influence
Oh, yeah.
of the song now.
Yeah, you can hear all the bands that came after it in this.
Even the way they're dressed and styled in the music video with like the painted nails
the
and
shaggy hair.
like the kind of like the still preppy clothing, but
it's kind of ripped
just
up.
a few years later, so
Everybody-
many bands looked like that.
Everybody was gonna look like this in 5 years.
Yeah.
Because like they look like an emo band, Hawthorne Heights kind of thing. The Hawthorne Heights especially, like, and I'm pretty sure if you asked, oh shoot, that singer's name, I follow him on TikTok, the singer for Hawthorne Heights. He answers all. Go on TikTok and find Hawthorne Heights official. He answers everybody's questions.
Oh, that's nice.
He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if I asked him if this song was influential, he'd make a full 3 minute. You know what I mean? Like, because they like this is exactly what Hawthorne Heights sounds like to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and if you wonder where that sound comes from, this is where it would be. But the part of the song that gets me actually is there's a cool like call and response because there's 2 vocalists, and there's a part of the song that's this really cool call and response. We hear all the old songs, we sing all the old words. I don't know why I love that part of the song so much, but every time I hear it,
Oh, I know. And then, like, the slow drum that's beating. And then, like, the use of, like, the slow motion and stuff in the video. Like, years later, like, one video that specifically comes to my mind is AFI, the Leaving song, part 2, I believe.
Yeah.
There's that, like, it's, like, such an iconic looking shot where it's slow motion and the band is all jumping up in the air, like, in unison, and it's slow motion. Like, there's so much of that in this video.
There's also, like, you have the gif of a little bit of it there, but there's a dope-ass synchronized splits in this.
Yeah.
It's
the drop.
And they do great, like, and they're fully aware of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't like, oh, this is just cool stuff to do. Like, they're fully aware of a lot of, like, the movements and the thing. Like, they know what looks good. They know what sounds good in that moment. Mm-hmm. And to hear that it was kind of an unplanned, all right, let's just figure this out as we go, it's even more impressive.
Yeah.
Because we know what figuring it out as you go was like, and it's stressful. They probably only had that warehouse for 2 days, you know?
I'm not even sure. Like I said, it's hard to find, like, concrete information on the music video. Like, I'm just gonna assume that they listed Dennis, the frontman, as the director, because I can't even find like basic information like that. I just read in an old interview that they went to this warehouse and this guy that they knew who was also in other bands, like, had all this stuff there waiting for them, and
sounds like we're setting up the documentary we've always wanted to
I
make.
don't know.
We're gonna make this into a documentary. Finding refused. How did you make this video? And we're gonna talk to Tom DeLonge. We're gonna talk. You know what I mean? Like, that's the document. We figured it out. We've always wanted to make a documentary about something we like. That's gonna be it.
Yeah.
Like,
it's so funny that this song came out, like, that same year that all those, like, boy bands and stuff were starting to rise. Because, yeah, this is, like, the type of song where if you're sick of hearing all that stuff, like, you hear a song like this and you're like, I understand that anger.
I
like,
wish I'd have heard this then. Like, I wish I would have heard this then. Because that would have been...
Yeah, that's why it was, like, ahead of its time, because it was coming out around that same time. So, like, what were they, reacting to, Like...
Right. And to hear the influence... You hear it, and it sounds now to us like that emo, screamo, post-punk kind of... But to hear that the influences of that were jazz and choral music and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
how did that work into making it what it was? I just want to talk to him. Like, I want to ask him the important questions here.
So yeah, I'm not quite sure if they've actually like gotten together to record new music or if they've just done like reunion tours. I know that members of Refused have gone on to form like other bands, but definitely look into this song. You may have heard it before, like it has
And you
been
don't even
used
realize.
in many movies and shows and video games, but highly influential and ahead of its time.
Absolutely. So that is Refused. New Noise.
Mm-hmm.